Welcome to my basement. The next section in the manual that we're going to be discussing is supplies. But I did want to say something at this point in the video, that at this point you might be feeling a little overwhelmed, and I don't want that. And you might think, where am I going to get started? How am I going to afford this? And she's got all this stuff, and feeling a little intimidated. And that's not the purpose of this video. The purpose is to give you some basic information and to leave out all of the stories and the funny anecdotes, because otherwise the video would be way too long and I don't want to bore you. So at this point you've been listening to me for more than an hour, and we've got quite a ways to go, and the information does progress to becoming more and more involved. So hang in there with me. Don't feel too overwhelmed, but just do what you can. Start where you can, whatever you can afford, and this is why we call the courses Self-Reliance course, because I want to repeat that self-reliance is a mindset, and you want to try to think about it continually. What can I do to prepare? Whether it's purchasing some extra supplies or some extra food, or maybe you need to prepare for the future for better employment, or you need to prepare for your health because you feel like it might be declining, or you feel as if you might not be spiritually prepared for some things that could come in life. So with that said, let's get started with talking about supplies. So we are on page 1 in the manual on supplies, and I will be turning the pages, hopefully just like you will be, and have you follow along. So emergency supplies. One of the things I want to point out is that you definitely want to have some cash on hand in case you need to bug out really quick and make it to another town, and you have to pay cash for a restaurant or a hotel or gasoline or whatever it is. When I was living in California, there was a major earthquake some years ago, and even though the grocery stores were allowing people to come in and get some things, only one person at a time could go in, and an employee would walk them through, bring them to the front register, and add up what their total was. And they were not giving any change because all of the cash registers were locked up. They couldn't get them open. So keep that in mind when you keep a little bit of cash on hand. For quite a long time they were recommending $100 in small bills and some change, quarters and things like that. But now I've heard recently that it's more like $300, which makes sense. The economy is obviously getting worse and things are becoming more expensive. So with your emergency supplies, these are just the basic supplies, and we will progress to talking about some more involved supplies. So let's talk about prescription medications and over-the-counter medications. That's what the OTC stands for. Think about what your own family needs. It is difficult nowadays to get any prescription meds for more than 30 days. But sometimes you can ask your doctor or your pharmacist to give you an extra prescription so that you never run out. So if something were to happen and you can't get your prescription, at least you've got 30 days to make it through. And some of your other supplies, of course, has to do with the needs of your family for your other medications. So assess what your family needs, but the most important thing with storing medications is you've got to watch the expiration dates. And some of the other supplies that you have is not as critical. That 3-month supply of food does have to be rotated every 3 to 5 years. Of course, your long-term storage you can put somewhere and just forget about it. But I think the most important things that you do need to watch out for is your prescription meds and your over-the-counter meds. Now candles, some of the best candles these are the pillar candles, the things that people use for weddings and receptions. They burn really slow and they burn clean. Most people know what an oil lamp is. Back in the 60s and 70s, these were really popular, and they are some of the best light source, and they will produce some heat as well. Also, you want to store plenty of lamp oil. And these things are fairly inexpensive. The pillar candles you can get sometimes for 50 cents a piece. Oil lamps, you can find those in thrift stores, garage sales. People are always trying to get rid of those. So that's a cheap way to get prepared. Okay, we've talked about propane stoves. They're fairly important to have on hand because barbecues can become more difficult for you to have to cook all of your meals that way. A propane stove, even though you have to use it outdoors, now I have in some circumstances it might be safe to use it indoors. I have a space on the other side of this wall that's a workroom, and there's a window that I could open up and get some ventilation, so I might be able to do a little bit of cooking in there and still be safe. Okay, Dutch ovens and cast iron skillets and pots and things. I am extremely frugal, and because all of this stuff can get expensive, I have not bought a Dutch oven yet. So, like I said, you think that I might be the guru of all of this and I've got all of these supplies, and I don't. I don't have them all. I just have a lot of information that I can pass on to people that I've collected over 25 years. So, to make a little bit of a compromise on buying my Dutch ovens, since they're $50, $60 a piece, I bought some of these cast iron pots. They have no feet on them. I can use it just like a Dutch oven. I can put some bricks around it and prop it up and put my coals on the ground. And what's nice about these pots is that they go like this. They're just a regular pot. And I invert, these are Lodge, by the way, for those of you that know about the Lodge company. You invert the lid, and I take a pair of vice grips, and of course this needs to be tightened a little bit. But you get the idea. You just snap it on, and you can use it as a handle. And then with Dutch ovens, you have to put your coals on top. So you put twice as many coals on top that you do on the bottom. And this works just great as a little makeshift Dutch oven. Some of the other supplies you want to make sure that you have for Dutch ovens is a little lifter. It's got a hook on it, so that way you're not touching the pot. You can lift that off the fire. Something that you can pick up coals with. And these are not oven mitts. They are fire-resistant heat pads, heat gloves. Okay. And then on the last page, on page 5 with aluminum foil cooking. For those of you that have some experience with Boy Scouts, this is something that even the real young Boy Scouts can do. You take some aluminum foil, heavy-duty aluminum foil, and you tear off a piece, and you put your meat in there, and your cut-up vegetables, and you fold it up, and roll it up, and put it on a grill, put it on an open fire, and you've got a nice little meal in about 30 to 40 minutes. So there's a few more things on the table that I want to point out to you. This is a nice little LED lamp, and this did cost quite a bit. It was about $50, and what's nice about this is it has a crank where you can charge it, you can plug it in, you can recharge your cell phones, and one of the classes that I taught, one of the gals that was there just thought this was the most amazing thing. She just went on and on and on about this little thing, and I thought, hey, if this is the only thing that she buys right now, this is a nice thing to have. There's another type of LED light. This one only costs maybe I don't know, less than $10. And these LED lights, they last a long time, and they're very bright. The other thing that I failed to mention with the oil lamps is you need to make sure you buy some wicks, because as long as you burn, the longer that you burn them, you have to cut the tips off and start all over again. So make sure you've got some of those. Okay, some long matches, wind matches, storm matches. Make sure that you have some of those, especially wind and storm matches, because if you're outside trying to light fires, it's pretty difficult to do with just your normal matches, and even the long stick matches will go out fairly easily when you're trying to light these outside. Even in a light wind, these things are very difficult to stay lit. And then the other thing was just a basic first aid kit. I think this one cost $9. And there's lots, what I like about some of these first aid kits is there's lots of space in them. Lots of extra room to put things in, and a nice little first aid guide. Okay, that concludes the basics of the emergency supplies. And the next thing that we're going to talk about in our manual is going to be page 6, and those are the additional emergency supplies. And that gets much more involved. Some of those supplies can become much more expensive. I'm now on page 6 in the manual, additional emergency supplies. And this is a section of the manual where the things that you purchase can begin to get pricey. The very first thing in the manual in this section are things such as kerosene heaters, propane heaters, and generators, and they can be very expensive. I have a kerosene heater that I bought at Walmart. It was about $100. The problem with kerosene is that, first of all, it's extremely flammable, and it smells, so you have to light it outside and then try to carry it in, and that can be rather dangerous. Generators, you have to store gasoline, and gasoline needs to be rotated once a year, so those are some things that you need to consider. And I also like to have some 5 or 6 gallon buckets on hand. You can store all kinds of things in here. Especially if you live in the south, you need to store your charcoal briquettes in these because it's rather humid, and the briquettes can take on moisture and then be very difficult to light. And I'm not going to read everything on this list. You can look it over yourself. One of the things that you might want to have is a little mini food processor. Those can be plugged into little solar panels. They run quite well. Down at the bottom, it talks about an old school corded telephone. And that is, of course, if the electricity goes out. And the thing about the old school phones, that if you go outside to your actual telephone panel where your phone service is coming into your house, there's usually an old school plug that you can plug a phone into. So you might want to go look and see if you have that. Okay, on the next page, on page 7, I like to collect Boy Scout manuals, merit badge manuals, just different kinds of tape, and down at the bottom I have things like cast iron cookery, and that's if you're going to cook outside or cook over an open fire. Just all kinds of things like that. Different boxes. You can always do things with boxes. And then on page 8, one of the things that I do talk about on that particular page, and I've listed, is a pressure cooker canner. And some people have water bath canners, and that's for canning fruits and tomatoes and things such as that. But if you want to start canning some of your more, some meats and beans and things like that, you're going to need a pressure cooker canner. And this was about $60 at Walmart. And this will just take one layer. Some of them, one layer of jars. Some of them are a lot taller. This is the jiggle type. It doesn't have the gauge on it, so it was a little bit less expensive, which I prefer. This is what's called a kitchen mill, and of course this takes electricity. But if you do have a small solar solar panel setup with a deep cell battery and an inverter, you can hook these up to that, and it will run and it will grind even popcorn into cornmeal. And I grind a lot of my wheat in this and start introducing that into my diet. And if you have absolutely no electricity at all, this is a hand wheat grinder, and the wheat goes in here and it comes out this way and it goes into your little bowl. And this is a hand blender. And this does not blend very well. It does okay. If you're the type of person that likes to drink smoothies and put some greens in it, it does not grind it very well. You're going to have a grainy type of smoothie. But it does the job. Okay, some of the other things that I have on the table, I like to store lint. Don't throw your lint away from the dryer. This is extremely flammable. It burns pretty darn quickly, but it's a very good fire starter. And I also save all of my bags, all the grocery bags. You never can tell what you're going to need these for, especially for sanitation and garbage. Okay, I'm on page 9 in the manual. One of the things I would like to talk about is some more books that you can collect. And when you really get into in-depth as far as preparedness and then step into the realm of being a survivalist, you need to know how to find things out in the yard that you can eat, learning how to use herbs and things of that nature, essential oils, different medicinal things that you can collect yourself. So I like to collect different kinds of books, and some of the books that I got were from the Amish people. This one's called Be Your Own Doctor, and this one's called Home Remedies from Amish Country. And there are some things that are in your cabinet that you can use that work for various different ailments. I also took a course online, and it was from a man named Dr. Christopher. It's the School of Natural Healing, and I'm studying to be a master herbalist. And the beginning course, it's a family herbalist course, very in-depth course. There's a herbal home health care, which is fantastic, herbs to the rescue, things that you can get out in the yard, making ointments and finding different ways to deal with poison ivy and bee stings and snake bites and stuff like that. And if you get burned and getting cuts, there's all kinds of things you can do to stop bleeding and to help with burns and that sort of thing. Okay, and then there's a list on page 9 of some extra first aid supplies that some people might not think about in a basic first aid kit, and it wouldn't even come in a basic first aid kit. Okay, on page 10, the last thing on page 10 that I have listed is potassium iodine tablets. And those tablets are in case of some kind of a nuclear fallout, nuclear exposure, and they protect the thyroid from absorbing the radiation that is in the air. Okay, the next page in the manual is page 11, and this is a really handy-dandy little list. It's 100 items that disappear first, and you might just want to look that over and start maybe making a grocery list of things that you might want to purchase. That goes for 2 pages. And then on page 13, there was a write-up of a person who survived the Sarajevo War and gave us some insight as far as what happens during a war. And again, you can just look that over yourself, but there are some things that we do need to definitely think about, especially water, and all kinds of canned foods were in need, and you know, anything that will help you with comfort. That this person did say thing about books, and what's interesting about what this person had said regarding books is that they didn't want to read survival books and all that stuff. You know, they're right in the middle of a war, and they want to read things that are going to help them, give them some comfort. So they're reading romance novels and things of that nature. So I hope you find this section helpful. I know I went through it very, very quickly. It is something that you will have to read and go through because there's just a lot in there, and you can get as in-depth as you want to, or you can just stick with the beginning of the chapter and make sure that you have those basic emergency supplies.